Welcome to another bonus edition of the MTB podcast, a segment of the weekly episode that I call Afterthoughts. This is my favorite part of these weekly presentations because it gives me a chance to dig a little deeper into something that came up during the main episode. So, in this week's main presentation, we talked a lot about how symbols can shape what we believe, sometimes before we've even had a chance to think about it. From empty tombs to crosses on steeples, the Christian tradition is filled with strong emotional images. But when we peel back the layers and actually ask, where did this symbol come from? Things get a little interesting, and sometimes a little awkward. So let's start with a question most people never even think to ask. Why is the cross the symbol of Christianity? Seriously, Jesus' followers didn't run around wearing little gold crosses on chains. For the earliest believers, the cross wasn't a symbol of hope or redemption. It was an execution device. It would have been like using a noose or an electric chair to represent your faith community. Kind of a hard sell at the farmer's market. So, how did we go from a community that quietly shared a fish symbol to one that proudly displays crosses everywhere, from churches to coffee mugs to bumper stickers? That's what we're exploring in this episode of Afterthoughts. This isn't just trivia, it's a case study, a way to understand how movements evolve, how their symbols change, and how those changes reflect the priorities, the power structures, and the values of the people involved. And if we want to build better stories, healthier communities, and a more thoughtful world, then this kind of symbolic archaeology is exactly where we need to start. So with that, let's dive in. All right, let's rewind the timeline a bit. Way back to the earliest followers of Jesus, before there were cathedrals, creeds, or crucifixes. Back then, the symbol of Christianity wasn't a cross. It was a fish. Yep, a fish. Now, not just any fish. This wasn't someone doodling a trout on a scroll and accidentally starting a religion. It was the ichthys, which is the Greek word for fish. But early Christians used it as an acronym. Jesus Christos Theo Hio Soter, right, which translates to Jesus Christ, Son of God, Savior. And I'm sure I slaughtered the pronunciation, but you get the point. It was an acronym, kind of a secret code packed into 5 little Greek letters. And it really was a secret code. Early Christians were under Roman persecution. Being too open about your faith could get you imprisoned or worse. So they needed a symbol that was subtle, right? That didn't scream, "Hey, look at me, I'm part of a banned religious movement." The ichthys was something you could draw in the dirt, carve into stone or wear as a pendant without raising too many eyebrows. It was just a quiet way to say, "I'm one of you. You're not alone." That simplicity is what made it powerful. The fish wasn't about power or sacrifice or martyrdom. The fish was about belonging. It was a symbol of community, not conquest. It was really just a reminder that people were coming together, not because they necessarily wanted to overthrow Rome, but because they were drawn to a different way of life. A way of life that was centered on compassion, shared meals, and hope. And honestly, that's kind of beautiful. Before Christianity became tangled up with empire and hierarchy and nationalism, before the message was overshadowed by the machinery of religion, the symbol of the faith was just a fish. Gentle, humble, inclusive. Not bad for something you can draw with 2 curved lines. Now, let's talk about the symbol we all do associate with Christianity today, the cross. The thing is, we've seen it on churches, on necklaces, on bumper stickers, even as massive tattoos, and it's so common that most of us never stop to think about what it actually is. But let's be clear, the cross wasn't always this sanitized spiritual icon. It was a Roman execution device, a method of torture, public, brutal, designed to break a person physically, psychologically, and to do it publicly. So it's kind of wild that this became the central image of a religion built, at least allegedly, on love and peace. In fact, if you had suggested to an early Christian, someone hiding from Roman soldiers, someone who maybe had seen a crucifixion up close, if you had told them that they would wear a little gold cross around their neck one day, they'd probably ask you if you'd lost your frickin' mind. Only they wouldn't say frickin'. For them, the cross was just a symbol of terror and shame. It took centuries, literally hundreds of years, for the cross to be reimagined as something redemptive. Why? Because that rebranding didn't really start until Christianity started gaining political power. Enter Constantine, a 4th century Roman emperor who not only legalized Christianity, but leaned into it hard. And with that shift from underground movement to imperial religion, well, the message had to change. The cross, which had been a horrific symbol of state violence, was reinterpreted as a symbol of divine victory. Victory over the cross. The pain and humiliation that was once associated with it became the proof of spiritual strength. And that, my friends, is when the cross went from a marginal warning to a full-blown imperial logo. It wasn't about resistance anymore. It was about divine sanction. That's how suffering got spiritualized, and the tool of the empire became the banner of the church. All right, so we've talked about the fish and the cross, but the Christian symbol story doesn't end there. Symbols shift because the needs and priorities of a movement shift. What starts out as a quiet way to say, hey, I'm one of you, can eventually become a polished logo on a website or slapped on the side of a political rally bus. Let's start with the Chi Rho. That's the one that looks kind of like a fancy PX smooshed together, like a large P and a little X at the bottom of it. It's formed by combining the first 2 letters of Christ in Greek. Chi, which is the X, and the Rho, which is the P. Constantine claimed to have seen this symbol in a vision before a big battle. Because, what better time to get spiritual than when you're about to swing swords for the empire? He put it on his army's shields and banners. Just imagine a symbol that started as a cryptic declaration of faith suddenly becomes a divine stamp of approval for war. I'm guessing that's not exactly what the early fish folk had in mind. Then there's the lamb. For centuries it was central, symbolizing innocence, sacrifice, and redemption. It painted a picture of gentleness and vulnerability, tying back to the idea of Jesus as the Lamb of God. These days, you don't see it as much. It's a little too soft, maybe. Doesn't quite vibe with the whole fire and brimstone aesthetic of certain modern preachers. We've kind of replaced the lamb with the lion, or more accurately, a lion with an American flag for a cape. And let's not forget the Sacred Heart, a symbol of that's particularly emphasized in Catholic tradition. It's all about divine compassion and empathy, with imagery of a heart burning with love, sometimes pierced or wrapped in thorns, like the crown of thorns that Jesus allegedly wore. I mean, talk about intense. It's meant to reflect how deeply Jesus feels for humanity. But again, it's a little too vulnerable to be trendy in today's performative displays of faith, especially among those who prefer their theology armed and angry. So today we see cross necklaces, minimalist church logos, even slick branding for Jesus 2025 kind of bumper stickers. Symbols have become marketing. Well, that's not always a bad thing. It's just a reminder that symbols evolve to meet the moment. So here's a question I'd like you to think about. What does it say about a movement when its dominant symbols shift from symbols of belonging to symbols of brutality to just flat out corporate branding? And maybe more importantly, what are the symbols we're using today, and what do they really say about us? All right, so we've explored the fish, the cross, the chi-rho, and a lot of stuff in between. Let me try to bring this home. Let me ask you this. What symbols do you personally connect with, and why? Is there a logo, an emblem, a flag, a tattoo, or even a piece of jewelry that sparks something in you? Maybe it reminds you of a moment or a movement or just a meaning you hold close. Maybe you wear a cross necklace even if you're no longer religious, because maybe to you it represents family or hope or simply your journey. That's valid. Symbols should be personal. They are personal. But here's the thing. They're also powerful. I can't forget that. Symbols are powerful, and power can be tricky because symbols don't wait for you to think. They hit you right in the gut. A symbol can evoke pride or fear or trust or loyalty before your brain even checks in. That's how marketing works. That's also how propaganda works. That's how someone in a red hat with white text or waving a certain flag can make your stomach drop, even if they're smiling and saying hi. We've all experienced stuff like that. I mean, there's a reason certain bumper stickers raise your blood pressure, right? So here's maybe the big takeaway. We're allowed to question the symbols we've inherited. And we're allowed to reinterpret them or even just let them go altogether. If a symbol you once loved now makes you cringe, it's okay to say, thanks for the memories, and move on. And if something new comes along that better reflects who you are today, well, embrace it. Just do it intentionally. Symbols are tools. They can build communities, or they can build walls. They can heal, or they can harm. But they don't have minds of their own. Remember that. We give them meaning, which means that we give them power. So let's be thoughtful about the ones we use and the ones we respond to. Let's make sure they still match the values we're trying to live by. Because when we choose our symbols wisely, they can become more than images. They can become reminders of the better world we're trying to build. So, what have we learned from our tour through fish, crosses, lambs, and sacred hearts? Well, symbols tell stories, and just like stories, they evolve. Not just because people tend to be flaky or inconsistent, but because cultures grow, values shift, and we start to see the world and ourselves differently. That's not weakness. That's growth. That's what it means to be alive and to be learning and growing and changing. Take Christianity, for example. It started with a fish. Quiet, subtle, community-focused. Then it moved to a cross. Loud, public, and ultimately tied to empire. That shift wasn't accidental. It reflected a major change in the movement's identity, in its purpose, and definitely in its power. And it reminds us that what we choose to represent us matters. So now let's flip the question to us. As we work toward building a world rooted in compassion, in reason, and equity, well, what symbols will tell our story? What shapes and signs will reflect the values we're trying to live by? And maybe more importantly, how do we make sure those symbols don't get hijacked or hollowed out along the way? Because the symbols we carry aren't just decorations. They're declarations. And we get to decide what they declare. All right, thanks for joining me for this episode of Afterthoughts. If you want to keep up on everything I'm doing, please head over to thecodaproject.com and subscribe to my newsletter. You'll get notifications whenever I publish anything, and I'll also keep you updated on the weekly live streams of Mythologizing the Bible, which includes this Afterthoughts episode. Also, if you subscribe for free over at thecodaproject.com, you'll start receiving my weekly resource called The Weekly Compass. This is a brief, once-a-week guide on a single core value. Think of it as a mini lesson plan for personal growth. It's perfect for families, students, and adults because I include discussion questions designed for each age group. And each weekly issue centers on a short reflection about the week's value, followed by discussion questions that are tailored for different age groups, from kids to college students to adults. And then a simple take action step, like a small challenge or exercise you can do to put that value into practice. Especially for families, it's designed to be an easy way to ensure that at least once a week, you're making time to talk about morality, ethics, and core values. So if you're interested, please go subscribe for free at thecodaproject.com. Thanks again for listening. Until next time, keep thinking, keep questioning, and keep seeking the truth.